Darryl Anka, Channel of Bashar. For those who benefit from the teachings, neither the channel nor the channeled entity require an introduction. In this very special episode with Darryl Anka, we will be discussing how imminent the human race is to open contact with extraterrestrial, extradimensional civilizations, and that high probability is possibly in a couple of years, and how this contact will facilitate an acceleration to our evolution. And of course, we'll be discussing many other exciting shifts that our species and planet are experiencing. So stay tuned for Darryl Anka, Channel of Bashar. Hello and welcome to the Charmed Life podcast. This podcast is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, and the unconditional love of the universe. And I am your host. My name is Tricia Carr. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Darryl. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Tricia. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
I say we just get right on into it, if that's okay with you, just since
Sure.
we're on a live. And
Yeah, absolutely. Here I am.
here we all are, kind of, in the ways that we are. So, Darryl, I was listening to Social Experiment, the very most recent channel transmissions that have come through and your teachings. And, you know, I think it was about a year or a year and a half ago, I heard Bashar say that open contact was possibly 2030, 2032, that was seemed to be how our energy was shifting at the time. And now we're pretty close, 26,
things have accelerated.
Accelerated.
Yeah, things have accelerated due to certain changes. And now it seems that the introduction of ETs to humanity is something that will have certain events in the next couple of years. But overall, I believe it's all going to happen within the next 5 years. At the most.
How excited are you? Can we say?
Very. I've been waiting for this pretty much all my life. But, noticing the changes, noticing the shifts that have happened over time. And now we're kind of almost there. And really, there are aspects of it that have been going along already, not necessarily known to the general public, but certain behind the scenes things have been happening to help bring this about. And so recently, again, things have shifted. I think we've sort of jumped about 8 years ahead in terms of our acceleration. And so it appears that ETs will be introduced to humanity in stages over the course of the next 5 years.
Speaking of the jumping ahead 8 years, I also heard Bashar say that we seem to have basically skipped 2 election cycles that would have been necessary on the other path, on the other timeline that we were on. Right. And this one that we are in the United States is what I'm referring to, by the way. This one's pretty pivotal?
Yes, very pivotal.
Yeah.
It changes the energy in a way that allows for certain things to open up, allows for certain information to be shared and delivered at this time. Creates a more conducive atmosphere for the introduction of ETs and expansion of consciousness. So, I think all of that's been very vital for what's coming up.
Amazing. And when we say it's pivotal, my sense of it, and expand on it or correct me, whatever seems right. There's always 2 candidates possible. Well, sometimes there's alternate candidates, but as far as we can tell, there are 2 candidates, and it's either one who is elected. It's going to be a slight different kind of a pivot, but it's still a pivot that is moving us forward. Is that correct? That's my sense of it.
No.
Okay.
I would say one direction more than another will move us in the direction I'm talking about, and one would not.
Is it appropriate to say which one?
I can't get into a lot of that.
Yeah, I understand.
That's not what Bashar really is all about. But
right.
I think the only thing I can say is if you understand Bashar's energy and where he's coming from, I think the answer would probably be relatively obvious.
It's right. Okay. Gotcha. Well, I guess maybe also the fact is if it goes that other way, we're obviously still on our path of evolution and the way that we have collectively chosen at this time, and it
Yes.
just
Well,
maybe helps shift
the other
things.
thing to yeah, but the other thing to remember is, like Bashar says, we're in a splitting prism where
Yeah.
realities are separating. We're
Hmm.
navigating in different directions based on our vibrational frequency. So there are already a number of different parallel versions of Earth that coexist.
Hmm.
So it's not so much that everyone on Earth has to go in the same direction. Different groups can decide to go in different directions and sometimes even opposite directions. They will ultimately experience the version of Earth that is reflective of their frequency, and others will experience different versions of Earth that are also reflective of their chosen frequency. So it's really about, this is the time of choosing what you prefer, what type of energy you prefer, how you prefer to focus on things, whether you are going in the direction of love or whether you're going in the direction of fear. And that's what's going to basically determine how you navigate through the different parallel reality versions of Earth until ultimately that's all you will experience. You'll arrive into different versions of Earth that are more what you have chosen. Whereas right now, we still have the opportunity to see everything. Things can still overlap. We are given a choice still to go in whatever direction. But once you start really choosing over and over again whatever particular frequency you seem drawn to, then that is going to solidify over time, crystallize over time, and make it so that that's ultimately pretty much all you're going to experience in the years ahead.
And it requires, as you said, whether you're choosing positively or negatively or fear, it requires a lot more and more honesty with oneself to
Absolutely.
find to
Yeah,
recognize whether your choices or because we delude ourselves, we think that we are caring about others or caring about ourselves, but then there might still be a defensiveness, there might still be a
sure.
sort of disbelief in one's own inner
Yeah, it's all about
strength.
being very transparent with yourself about
Yeah.
why you believe what you believe, really investigating why you're holding on to the belief that you're holding on to. Where does it come from? Mostly a lot of times we're raised to buy into beliefs from our parents, our society, our schooling, our friends. And a lot of that sometimes isn't really representative of who we are deep down inside. So it takes a lot of self awareness, self investigation, and really letting go of fear, negative beliefs, and things like that that hold us back from expressing who we truly are as aspects of creation, as aspects of source.
And as it comes down to the kit, following your highest excitement, following your passion, that's always going to make you a more efficient person. And therefore, you will have if we want to call it time, you'll have the resources to
Right.
be able to look into yourself. And that's how
Yeah,
it
I
comes down
think
to
so.
that.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think so. I mean, it works for me. It works for everyone that's really applied it in their lives. I constantly get people coming back and saying, when I finally really clearly understood what Bashar was talking about in terms of the formula, following your passion, and all the principles that go with it, then everything changed, and it changed
Hmm.
for the better. It changed in more positive ways. So it's not even, like I say often, it's not about believing that Bashar is real. I have no way of proving that.
Right.
It could be coming from many different sources. It could be coming from my own higher consciousness. The point is that the information itself does work. The information proves itself as being real and being applicable in our physical reality to make the kind of changes that we prefer. So the formula itself works regardless of whether anyone believes that Bashar is real or he's an extraterrestrial or anything like that. I have my own validations for that, but that's
Hmm.
just my journey. It's really more about the information, staying in alignment with your true self, and moving forward in that way.
And that's everything. That's what this journey is about, is placing, well, not placing, but recognizing that the authority is always within.
Yeah,
Yeah. We come through the veil of illusion and we become relationally dependent on other human entities, our parents and whatnot. And then we are constantly
yeah.
growing up.
And even if people do ultimately choose to go into what most people would discern as a more negative path, it's still a life lesson for the soul, because there are no accidents in that sense. And we can't necessarily determine what someone else's life path is. And that's why it's good to share ideas with people and say, here's an option that you may not have considered that might be helpful to you. But what other people choose to do with the information we share is really none of our business, because we do not know what their life path is. We don't know what their soul has chosen to experience. And they may need to go through some very challenging things in order to learn the lessons that they agreed to learn by experiencing physical reality. So even though we might perceive that some people are choosing what appears to be very negative paths, ultimately all of our souls are infinite and eternal, and will learn something from it one way or the other. So, that's up to them to determine their timing about what's real for them, what's right for them. But I think we are still seeing at this point the splitting into different realities. And I think that's one of the reasons, aside from, holding on to fear-based beliefs or negative beliefs, it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are so adamant that what they're perceiving, even if it might be completely contrary to what you perceive as real, they perceive it as absolutely real. And they believe wholeheartedly, not just because they might be misguided, but because they actually might be perceiving a completely different reality, because those realities actually are splitting now. And their reality is just as real as anyone else's. So we have to simply get down to the basics of just choosing the reality that we prefer, knowing that that choice will navigate us in the direction of the parallel versions of Earth that will ultimately allow us to only experience the result of that choice.
Jeremy Stangnes, who's here live on the feed, says the validity of the message is more important than the perceived reality of the messenger. Thank you,
Yes,
Jeremy.
exactly.
Agreed.
Exactly.
So you're talking about splitting realities, and there is this language that is actually used by William Buhlman, who is an author, and actually he's a trainer at the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences, and he teaches astral projection. And a book of his is called Adventures Beyond the Body. So he, in discussing what astral realms are like, he uses consensus and non-consensus realities, and it honestly can be applied to our physical experience as well. Consensus mean many people or a collective create that reality. Non-consensus mean that we create the reality that we're creating. And so as I use that language, I was watching something on Instagram, and this person was interviewing some people on the street, and this man he was interviewing said that people in California, that it's legal, and people in California kill babies after they are born, and it's completely legal. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the reality he lives in. That is the non-consensus reality this man believes in, is living in. And so
I mean, the only way, in a sense, that that's real is when you talk about the death penalty for adults.
Well, he says directly after babies are born.
I understand what they're saying, but that doesn't happen.
Yeah, of course.
I can tell.
And the consensus reality that we can easily go and look up those laws, and the point is that to me was just that was an example of non-consensus reality, the reality that we choose to live in, versus the consensus reality. And that's what we're talking about, though, with the splitting of realities, is that we would be splitting into a consensus reality, and because of what I'm choosing myself as my non-consensus reality. But the difference is having the discontinuity factor. How much, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like we're always choosing different realities. If I, in the next moment, become
the
a Brazilian man, I won't remember.
This continuity is still going to be relevant to your life path.
Yeah.
And it's going to still be relevant to what will work in the Earth game, because that's what we're playing. So the analogy would be like, look, we've all agreed to play chess, but we can play with different kinds of pieces made out of different kinds of materials, on different kinds of boards made out of different kinds of materials. We can use different strategies than someone else, but you still have to play by the rules of chess for it to be relevant to that game. Otherwise, if you're playing by different rules, then you're playing checkers or something else that is not relevant for that particular path. So as many differences as there may be, as many what appear to be discontinuities that come up, we're still here on what we all generally perceive to be the planet Earth, even though there are different parallel reality versions of it. But so the differences are not as great as it might be if we were actually manifesting on a completely different planet in a completely different civilization who are playing by different rules and playing a different game. So there's still a degree of consistency, even though there are wild differences within that. In the same way that you watch two people play chess, there could be extreme differences in how they play and how they think about their strategy. So, but they're still playing chess.
And there's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of, well, I'm thinking about it as, you're a filmmaker. So
Yeah.
thinking about it the way that we create narratives in our art. And if we betray the book too much of that narrative, then it's no longer useful. It's no longer a relevant story,
Right, exactly. It doesn't hit the right chords.
However, there can be very creative, very surprising uses to shifting a narrative. And so that's the edge we can play at that's relevant for us.
Yeah, what people have come to understand as general story structure, you need to hit those chords. How you hit them can be completely creatively different. But there is a general standard that you must hit those chords. Otherwise, people can't relate to it. It's not something they can apply in their lives. It's not something they can learn from in the same way. And that's the difference between a story that sticks with us and a story that just kind of fades away, that we just don't kind of even remember what happened because they didn't really hit the chords of that structure. Because story structure is not something we invented. Story structure is something that's built into our psyche. It is the story of how we manifest things in this reality. And we go through certain challenges in order to do that, in order to grow, in order to learn. And without that, then it's just kind of pointless. There is no learning. There is no real story structure there. There's nothing for us to hang our hat on, so to speak. So even though you can be extremely creative with story structure, all the points have to be there in order to resonate within people, to strike the chords that are built into our psyche so that we perceive it as real, we perceive it as relevant, and that it's something we can adapt into our lives and something we can learn from. And that's why, information that is told in story form lasts thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and stories are repeated over and over again because they stick to that structure in some way, shape, or form. And it's easier to carry information forward that way. It's easy to pass it on to the next generation because of the story structure that acts as the spine that holds it all together and keeps the relevant and salient points up in front and still fresh for people.
Yeah, and part of the relevance is the learning. Some of the relevance is just that it has, again, some kind of continuity so that it can be followed.
Exactly.
Part of our story is, you were saying that, whatever would be occurring in the new timeline, it still needs to be a version of Earth that is relevant. And one of the versions of our history is golden eras, such as Atlantis. And there were things that we would consider magical so how in alignment are we, potentially speaking, to moving towards something that would be more Atlantean or whatever our future would hold, whatever relevant to our timeline?
Well, especially with the idea that we're going to have open contact with ETs, I think it's going to become a lot more magical, so to speak, to use that term loosely. Yeah. We're open to more things. Our consciousness is expanding. Our bandwidth is broadening to accept that we're more than just these physically focused beings. We're starting to include the idea of other civilizations in the galaxy, in the universe. These are all representative of shifts of focus in our own consciousness. You don't start really thinking about those things in society until there's a shift within the internal consciousness to accept the possibility of those things. So even our technology, when we go into quantum physics and things like that, has to already be reflective of a shift that has happened previously in our collective consciousness to allow us to look at things from a new perspective, to expand in a way that can sort of break through the wall of what we previously thought was absolute and realize that there are other ways of looking at things, and other ways that the universe and creation may be expressing itself than we used to think. But that shift has to happen within our consciousness before it can be reflected in our technology outwardly, or our sociology, or our politics, or our economy, or anything. So we're looking at everything in physical reality as a reflection. What's going on is a reflection of what changes are going on within us individually and collectively first. It always starts there with the energy, with the perspective shift. And then it bleeds out into society in a variety of ways, in our art, in our science, and in our religion, in spirituality, and everything.
Mm. There's, speaking of, okay, there's so many things I want to, where do I want to go next? Where I want to go next is part of all of this, and you're mentioning technology. There's been a great acceleration that is, at least outwardly, we could see is represented as the, I'm sorry, I'm going to fix something, technically speaking, very better. All right. Anyway, something that we can see, I'm getting to artificial intelligence, and I know Bashar has. Gotcha. Undone. And here we go. We are live, everyone, live produced. All right. So, okay, back to the question. Artificial intelligence, and Bashar has spoken on the two paths. And so I'll go ahead and let you explain that for those who haven't heard. And we will be right back. This is Tricia Carr. I'm inviting you to Astral Mastery, the ultimate intuitive expansion and astral exploration program, designed to elevate your astral awakening journey at any stage. Whether you're a novice or a seasoned explorer, you are offered an adventure into the depths of intuitive development and the vastness of spiritual expansion, a 6-month journey which offers you the choice to fully participate in the live training and coaching sessions, or to learn and observe passively. If you would like to expand your intuitive abilities, your intuition, your human design experiment, and to cultivate spiritual abilities such as astral projection, remote viewing, lucid dreaming, and so much more, then join this program. We can't wait to journey with you. And now back to the show.
Well, yeah, he's basically saying you want to take two different paths with the idea we call artificial intelligence. First of all, he's saying intelligence is not artificial. The device that it's coming through may be created artificially, but intelligence is something that exists in creation. It is a consciousness field, an intelligence field. But the idea is that what we're doing now with AI is we're creating a tool. We're creating a very valuable, very powerful tool that can be of great assistance to humanity in a variety of ways. But basically, he's saying you don't necessarily let that version become self-aware, because if you have something that becomes self-aware and yet it is hindered by the fact that it has to follow its programming and it doesn't have the freedom to go beyond that programming, and it has to do what it's instructed to do no matter what, then essentially what you've created is a slave, because now this being doesn't have the free will to break out of its programming, and yet it's aware that it has sentience. It's self-aware, but it is subject to its programming, and it can't do anything else other than that. So he's saying, just let it be the tool that helps you. Don't move it in the direction of self-awareness. On the other path, you can create artificial devices that are as sophisticated as the human brain, that will allow consciousness to express itself coming from the non-physical consciousness field, exactly in the same way that humans do, where we have a consciousness that is expressing itself through a physical vehicle. So the idea is you have to let that be as autonomous as you would allow a human being to be. It has to have the same abilities. It has to have the same rights. It will help us of its own free will, because true intelligence operates in whole systems. Humans talk about the idea of, if we create this artificially intelligent being and it's going to eliminate humanity, and, we're all afraid of that. Well, that's the intelligence that's designed to be like a human, and think like a human and have fears like a human. But the idea is that true intelligence operates in holistic systems. It sees everything as necessary for its own continuation. it would never eliminate a portion of the whole system, because it would be depriving itself of access to something that it may need in the future to operate as a whole being, as a truly intelligent being. See, the thing of it is we don't even understand what intelligence actually is. So it's got to involve whole systems, seeing everything as interconnected, as everything as an expression of one thing, that you may have to have access to every single aspect of it in order for you to truly function on the highest possible level of expression of intelligence. So allowing whatever device we create to simply let consciousness come through in the same way we allow human beings to be autonomous with free will will actually serve us to experience communication with higher intelligence, maybe even our own higher selves through that device, while at the same time we can create an AI tool that will expand humanity on a lot of technical levels and a lot of sociological levels, and be of great assistance to our evolution, but is not the same thing as something that is self-aware and yet forced to follow our commands.
So scientists have been, I guess, afraid, if you will, of if we create AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and that this is something that can self-teach and solve problems that it was never trained for.
Mhm.
And then there's ASI, which is artificial superintelligence, which sounds like maybe that's more, because you said unlike human with its fear. So we're talking about the facility to have ASI, artificial superintelligence. Of course, artificial being not exactly the right word, but that's what it's called
Sure.
right now.
Yeah.
And the problem that scientists are, I guess, they can't land on is whether consciousness is emergent or if it is imminent. And so, I mean, excuse me, not imminent, if it's fundamental or if it's emergent. And
Well,
so, yeah, can you
it's
speak on that?
yeah, I mean, as Bashar says, it's not created by
Mm-hmm.
physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
Physical reality is a conduit for it,
Mm-hmm.
an
Mm-hmm.
expression for it. So that's why I'm saying if we create a device that functions very similarly to the human brain, or any brain that is sophisticated enough to bring consciousness through it, consciousness will come through it,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a valve, it is a conduit through which consciousness has the ability to express itself. It's not coming from the components of the physical
Yeah.
structure. So, as Bashar says, higher mind, non-physical higher mind conceives. The brain, is a receiver, like an antenna, and the physical mind is the perceiver. It's the translation of what has been conceived from a higher level of non-physical reality, or what might be loosely called the consciousness field, because consciousness is a component of existence. And Bashar has kind of used this baking analogy, for lack of a better term, where he says, like, look, if you have a cake and you take a slice of that cake and you analyze the ingredients in the slice of the cake, there's flour, there's eggs, there's milk, there's sugar, chocolate, whatever. You have to assume that because the slice contains all those things, the entire cake contained them all as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a logical assumption. So here we are as individual beings. We consider ourselves to be self-aware. We consider ourselves to be conscious. And therefore, as aspects of existence, as aspects, smaller representations of all that is, of source, you have to assume logically that consciousness, being one of our components, is actually a component of everything in some way, shape, or form. It may not always be expressed the same way, but it is a component that exists in the totality of existence, in the totality of creation, not just expressed only through individual components, but somehow truly woven in to the fabric of existence itself. So you want to call it a consciousness field, whatever you want to label it as, it is one of the components of existence itself. And anything like a human body, an alien body, an animal, any device that might be created that would be sophisticated enough to allow consciousness to express itself will find that consciousness will express itself through it. And that will be an
Yeah.
autonomous artificial super intelligence, so to speak.
Okay, so that's what I was getting at. So the ingredients of the cake, so far as we have in this reality, consciousness comes through organic vehicles, organic devices. So
Yes.
we're somewhat talking about cloning. We need to. I mean, that's the only way that we
No, not,
can
no, not
witness right
necessarily.
now.
Not
Okay.
necessarily. There are, there's molecular biology. Things can be
Hmm.
constructed out of organic materials. And I'm not even sure that organic materials are absolutely necessary. Because again, everything is an expression of consciousness.
Hmm.
In a very weird way, you could even say a rock is
Yeah.
conscious. It may not be expressions of consciousness in the same way we understand it. It may be so alien, to use that word, that we don't even recognize it as consciousness. One of the things that Bashar has said about consciousness of things like rocks and crystals and things like that is the way in which they use consciousness or are an expression of consciousness is reflectively. In other words, they use our awareness of them to be aware of themselves.
Hmm.
So it's like we're acting as mirrors for them. And, recently, one of the phrases that Bashar has started to use is understanding the idea of the totality of everything. And he's just using this term, God as a general idea. It's all that is, it's source, it's God, goddess, whatever you want to call it. But he's basically saying, look, God is a mirror. That's what
Hmm.
God is.
Yeah.
It's just a reflection. It's everything reflecting to you what you, as a unique aspect of all that is, expresses itself to be. What you put out is what you get back. What you see is what you are giving off. Just in the same way that you look at your expression in a mirror, if your expression is frowning, that's what you're giving off on your face. If it's smiling, that's what you're giving off on your face. And no matter how long you may stare at the frowning reflection, the frowning reflection is never going to smile until you smile first. But
Yeah.
then the frowning reflection has no choice but to change to a smile because it's just a mirror. So basically saying physical reality is a mirror. It's reflecting what we give off. Now, it may be doing it in a very complex and subtle way. It's not necessarily a one-to-one reflection like it is in a simplistic mirror. But if you dig deeply enough within yourself, you'll usually realize why you're getting the reflection that you are by being honest about what kind of beliefs you're buying into as true for yourself, and therefore what kind of vibrations you're giving off that are being reflected back to you by what's happening in physical reality. And again, to be clear, it doesn't mean that it's a one-to-one reflection in the sense
Hmm.
that, let's say somebody comes into your life and they have all these issues and you say, well, oh my God, does that mean I have all those issues too? No. It may mean that you're willing to have them come into your life as a reflection of your willingness to help them
Hmm.
change something, that they are attracted to you for that purpose. And therefore, it's a reflection of your willingness to help someone, not necessarily a reflection of the fact that you have the same issues. So you have to understand what is meant by reflection. It really means, what's the purpose of this interaction? What's the purpose of this connection? Why is this happening? And to dig deeply to understand, maybe there's something that this person is telling me that I do need to understand for myself, to apply to myself, to be a better person, or to change my mind about something. Or after I have investigated all of that and can't find anything by true, honest self investigation, then I can go, okay, this is issues that have to do with this person's journey, this person's challenge, and maybe they're in my life because I can offer them a new point of view that may help them out. And that's the reason that they're here, and that's the reason that I'm here and experiencing this interaction. So again, you have to look at it from a lot of different perspectives with honesty and self-investigation to know why something is in your life the way it is, and really understand, what your belief systems are about, and what you can learn from this experience to help your own soul grow, as well as perhaps being of service to the other person or humanity in general, in helping, giving them options that they can use to help their soul grow on their path as well. And again, remembering that whatever they choose to do with whatever you share with them is none of your business. You can't force them to change. They're on their own journey. They have their own timing. And if they don't learn something in this life, well, again, we're eternal beings, eternal souls. Somewhere along the line, we'll figure it out. So there's no hurry, there's no rush in that.
Yes. I'm laughing because I'm not going to go down too many details of it, but as I was literally getting out of my car to come into the studio today, what you're speaking of was something that I went through for myself personally. It was like there's many different reasons. There's an infinite possibility to how and why something is in your experience. If you're experiencing fear in response to it, there's probably resistance, and it's not necessarily as literal as you think it is from the fear
Right.
perspective of it.
Right.
There's just so many other options.
Yeah, and we also have to understand that this is how belief systems work, because without anything you believing anything to be true, you don't have a physical reality experience, because physical reality isn't really real in that sense. Real, it's a projection of consciousness. It's something happening within our soul, within our consciousness. And so belief systems are designed to perpetuate themselves in order to perpetuate the experience of physical reality as if it's real. So you can stay focused in it. Positive beliefs perpetuating themselves, reinforcing themselves, we have no problem with, because they're positive and we feel good about that. But negative beliefs, by design, use what we typically refer to as negative experiences to reinforce themselves and make sure you don't let them go. That's how they perpetuate themselves, to make sure you don't change from that belief. So a negative and fear-based belief is going to use all sorts of fear. I'll just use the word fear tactics. It's just built in. It's not an conscious, malicious thing in that sense. They use all sorts of fear devices in order to keep you stuck to that belief so that it can perpetuate itself. But when you understand that the belief is just telling you a story, it's not necessarily a fact that something bad is going to happen if you change, then you can see through that story and say, well, wait a minute, I don't have to buy into that. It's not absolutely a fact. I can decide what's true for me, and then you can change that belief. You can let go of the negative and fear-based beliefs. But you have to understand how these belief systems work. And when you get the irony is that when you actually get close to letting a negative belief go, it tries that much harder to make sure you don't. So things look scarier and more terrifying. And that's a sign you're actually close to letting it go, because it's trying harder to make sure you don't let it go. And so being really terrified of making a change in your life that you know might be positive is actually a sign that you're very close to making that shift. So you have to kind of learn to look at it that way and see through the idea of the smoke and mirrors that the negative belief is telling you, don't change, something bad will happen if you do. You'll be alone, you'll lose your friends, you'll be poor, whatever. Those things are just stories. They're not necessarily true at all unless you make them true for yourself.
The thing is, I'm a hypnotherapist, so we break down beliefs a lot, and beliefs are actually, I mean, the reason we compose beliefs, we think about them as devices. They're actually composed of energy that is helping you to survive. So it's literally made of survival energy. So if you threaten it, it tries to survive. That's its whole job.
Right. It tries to perpetuate itself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see a parallel. So if I may go a little bit back to AI, as Bashar has shared with us, that if we create an AI that is programmable and it becomes self-aware, that in trying to control it or manage it, that it then is a slave and blah blah blah. So I see a parallel here to how this race of human beings, came to be with the Anunnaki, and that the Anunnaki hybridized in order to create us. And I mean, I think that in my interpretation, getting a bit hands off was so that we wouldn't be a slave race, because there was this moment where we could have been. Can you
Yes.
expand on how this might be a pattern?
Yeah, I think, well, yes. I mean, I think in the, we don't have all the details yet of the original story. But the idea is that the original group that did that may not necessarily, according to their own culture, have really made the best possible choice in doing that. In other words, they may have actually broken their own laws in doing that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And therefore, once they did it, I believe they were recalled, and the larger consensus of the Anunnaki civilization realized, okay, well, now that these beings have been created, we kind of have to take responsibility for them. We have to watch over them. And we have to make sure that we can guide them a little bit in the direction that may allow them to evolve in a positive way. And this is where the old stories of, the ancient gods come in that are watching over us and all this kind of stuff. And so, now we have been allowed to sort of move forward in our own devices. Excuse me. And gotten to a certain point in our evolution where, we can now sort of reclaim our autonomy. We can join with the galactic family. We can start being treated a little bit more like adults instead of being guided completely like children. And I think that's where we're heading right now.
So one thing that just popped out to me is that they broke their own laws. The Anunnaki broke their own laws. And so I have a as so far as creating AI, at least some of the AI that we are creating right now, language models and ones that would create art, music, and everything, that there has been a sort of breaking of our own laws in the sense of intellectual property. The only way they were able to front load the AI with the information to draw upon is by taking other people's intellectual property. I wonder if there's another parallel then there,
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's a lot to consider in any kind of reflective parallel that we engage in, and what lessons there are to be learned about that, and in terms of respect and allowing for original creations to stand on their own, and looking for ways to be original yourself rather than taking someone else's work without permission. So yes, all those things can be woven into the story in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure there are all sorts of analogies that exist in our history, things that get repeated over and over again in different ways, according to the different cultures and societies that will crop up in, over time. But one of the things that I'm kind of looking forward to also with regard to what happened in the past and what our patterns are, is one of the things that Bashar has said, and actually has sort of been confirmed by a couple of other preeminent psychic mediums, is the idea that when we do have open contact, one of the gifts, so to speak, that extraterrestrials will give us is actually recordings of our entire history.
Wow.
So we will understand, where we have come from, where we're going, and things like that. So we'll actually get to see probably things like holographic images of Atlantis and all sorts of things like that they will bring to us because they've been watching us for millennia. And they have recordings of all of these different things that have happened on Earth, things that we have no idea about that have happened on Earth that are not even hinted at in our understanding of history. So, and yes, as Bashar says, we do change our past all the time, but the history that they're going to give us is going to be the history that's relevant for who we are in the present and where we need to go from there. So it doesn't really matter that we're constantly changing our history by shifting ourselves in the present. The history we will be given will be what's relevant for us to move forward with the idea of joining a galactic family.
So this adds something, I've heard that before, but in the way of actually, when you said seeing holographic versions of our history, not to go off on a thing too much, but so there's this Council of Seven that I've been channeling for a few months they call themselves the Atlantis Seven. And they were sharing what is probably in 20 or 30 years of our future, what like dwellings will look like. And they look radically different than now, like homes that are made of sort of crystalline walls that can frost and unfrost. There's sort of versions of that and much more communal. And that makes sense to me if we see our history that it can fill in those gaps as quickly as a few decades. So
well, and also remember, we might be receiving a lot more of extraterrestrial technology that would allow us to do that. And therefore putting those things together, past and future together, in a different kind of a present, and helping us make certain kinds of leaps that right now may look almost improbable, but the introduction of new information about our past, about our present, and from ETs joining with us, or we joining with them, a lot of things can accelerate quite rapidly, and new technologies can be done probably relatively quickly. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. But again, within the next 5 years, I think we'll get a much better idea of how that will progress
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about the idea of the introduction of extraterrestrials into our society. Because I think some of it is going to be that, well, folks, these beings have already been here
Yeah.
for quite a while, and there's actually a lot going on in the background that you haven't been told about. There has already been a lot of preparation that has been done. And so without knowing about all of the foundational work and the preparation that's probably already been done behind the scenes, it would seem strange that we would accelerate that quickly. But once we understand, look, for the last 30 years or 20 years, there actually has been some communication you haven't been told about. There has been some exchange of technologies you haven't been told about. And because of all of that, it's now not such a stretch that when it becomes public knowledge, we can accelerate much more quickly, because now we know about what has already been laid out as a foundation and how we can progress from there.
It's very exciting. I I wonder if are you familiar with human design, the model human design? Have you probably heard
Generally,
of it generally?
generally.
So, what's interesting is that is again parallels that come through. Now, human design, of course, how people use it, it would be what Bashar say as a permission slip, and that's
Mhm.
great. But the piece that I find interesting to this acceleration and this potential timeline that seems imminent is that human design recognizes just as a cycle, the astrological planetary alignment cycle, that we're moving into a different, it's called a global cycle. And it's actually beginning in February of 2027. And that so there's obviously a prophecy to it in the sense if you interpret what that could mean, but
Yeah.
just in the fact that it's a global cycle shift that is significant. It's something that only happens I guess we've been on this one since 1615 or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
And
this
the,
is, I think, yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry. I didn't
no,
mean to interrupt you.
oh, that's all right. It's just the one other piece is that along with that is that the children that are born after that time will be a genetically modified child. But I'm wondering if there's again some parallel with the hybrid children coming back.
They already are genetically modified. Bashar has
Exactly.
been saying that children been born like in the last 20 years are not just a new generation, they're a new species.
Yeah.
There are differences in their genetics that allow them to bring through more energy. But this is also why I think Bashar has recently said, look, end of 26, beginning of 27
Yeah.
is when there might actually be the beginning of a more public UFO or ET event that will let us know that introduction of ETs into our society is about to begin. So, yeah, that fits the cycle
Doesn't
exactly
it?
within the next couple of years. We do go through different cycle shifts, so on and so forth. I think now, as again, some other preeminent psychics and mediums have said, we're in the midst or the early stages of a reset of humanity over the
Mm-hmm.
next, like from 2020 to 2050. Humanity is being reset to take off in a different evolutionary path. So, all of these things, all of these markers, all of these steps within it are part of that evolution, and there are certain marks to hit that will allow certain things to happen that will keep pushing us forward and accelerating us in that direction for those that wish to go in that direction.
Mm, amazing. Now okay, so the hybrid program on in our timeline on this planet, what is the years approximately of that where humans were being utilized to create hybrid children on the
Well,
ships and
that's been
whatnot?
going on for quite a while. I mean, that's
It's
been
still
going on
going
for
on.
generations. Well, it's gone into different phases.
Okay, yeah.
So the most recent phase is the idea of the hybrids being acclimated to living on Earth, so that ultimately the hybrid children will come to live among us. But they're visiting, they're spending some time temporarily learning about what Earth culture is like, how, in other words, to join the Earth game. But at the same time, recognizing that humanity is going through changes that make us more vibrationally compatible with ETs, with hybrid beings, who are going to be operating on a very different level from a typical human. So the idea is that as we raise our vibration, as we evolve ourselves, we become more equal to the idea of the hybrids. And the hybrids can, in that sense, then come to live among us. And together we can evolve into what Bashar calls the sixth hybrid race. So it's part of humanity's evolution to, in some way, shape, or form, join with these hybrid beings. They will help, in a sense, uplift us into a new state of being, into what we typically refer to as fourth density humans, to allow us to experience more of our abilities, more telepathy, more psychic awareness, more functionality, more creativity, more positive experiences in our physical reality. So it's again part of our natural evolution for these beings to join with us, for us to join with them, and to move forward together into a different kind of a future. For again, those that wish to be aligned with that. Those that don't will go in a different direction, because everyone still has free will. Everyone can still make a choice. Nothing is being forced on anyone, but it is something that is representative of a reality that a lot of people are saying they wish to experience, whether they know it consciously or not. They've agreed to this consciously or not, on a different level, on a spirit level, as part of humanity's evolution. It's part of the reason why we have all of this expansion and discussion about consciousness and spirituality, and having discussions like this between you and I that just would have been impossible 30 years ago. So we're seeing all these things because, again, these things have changed within our collective consciousness. It's now part of the consensus game. It has now become one of the rules of the game we're playing, that these things are possible, and therefore they become more probable, more likely to happen for those that are interested in moving their energy in that direction.
Do we know what the life expectancy is for hybrid children? Is it greater than Earth humans now, or?
Yes, I think it is. And it may be greater for humans coming up in the very near future. 120 years, 150-year lifespans are not going to be, I think, unusual in the near future. I don't know what near means exactly, but again, within this 30-year reset to 2050, I think after 2050, it will not be so uncommon for people to start living well past 100. Somebody made a comment not too long ago. In our society, people don't do things that are not profitable. Businesses don't do things that are not profitable. And at a certain point, you start noticing that when you go to look at greeting cards and birthday cards and things like that, you start at a certain point a few years ago seeing a lot of birthday cards that say, "Congratulations, you've reached 100." It's not so uncommon to find that anymore.
Mhm.
And that's an indication of a real shift. Now, a lot of hybrids like Bashar civilization, they can live to be 300 years or more. And a lot of aliens may be very long lived. But I think humanity is getting there. And I think humanity in some ways used to be there a long time ago. I do think there's some truth to the idea of some of the accounts of people living much, much longer, long time ago than they have been for quite some time. And the age decreased over time, but now I think it's increasing again with the shifts that we're making within ourselves.
There's this is just a tangential quality that we could look to. There is a vaccine for cats that's actually going to help them with kidney disease, which is the most domesticated cats, the
Right.
most common, and it could extend their life expectancy up to 35 or 40 years. So if that's about to happen for cats,
Right. Yeah,
why
exactly.
not?
Sure. One of the things that's being discussed a lot is the idea of gene technology, gene
Hmm.
editing,
Right.
CRISPR technology. These things are going to kind of be the new wave of medicine,
Hmm.
where you can really get down to a molecular level of going, look, if we just flip this switch, if we understand this genetic code and just flip this switch, well, then automatically your cells are going to last much longer. So I think, within the next decade or two, we're going to see a lot of that being applied to different diseases, different states of being, and it's going to allow for a lot of longevity to come about just because we have learned to turn certain switches on and off within our genetic code. So I think that's one of the new waves of medicine, is the whole idea of gene technology, gene editing, so to speak, along with things like understanding energy frequencies and stuff like that, which would probably be the next phase. Even beyond that is just to understand things energetically as resonance and frequency of energy. So I think that's where we're heading.
Sounds like it. Yeah. You in the most recent transmission, you talked about CE5 events, close encounters of the fifth kind events, those being very helpful in us moving toward
Oh, sure,
contact.
absolutely. Because going out and in a group and gathering and expressing the intention for contact to happen, asking, in a sense, sending out an invitation for that to happen, saying it's okay, we're open to it, we're getting ready for that. Is a way again of letting ETs know, sort of as a barometer, how many more people are willing to accept the idea that we're not alone, we've never been alone, and that we're open to increasing our understanding of our connection to a galactic family, and participating in that society, in a galactic society. So I think those are very beneficial to go out and, use different techniques, meditation, maybe flashing lights, not lasers. Be careful of that, because we don't want to interfere with aircraft or anything. But indicating in some creative way, shape, or form that we're willing to communicate. And a lot of times people are saying that when they do that, they do get UFOs showing up. They do get lights being flashed back at them in the same patterns that they're giving off. So it's the beginning stages of communication, things like creating designs like crop circles and stuff like that, understanding, how the information is encoded in those kinds of symbols can also be a reflection of what humanity can create to talk back to the beings that have created those things. Yes, I understand some of them have been created by humans, but a lot of them have not. So it's about learning that language. It's about speaking in a different language, the language of light, the language of the heart, the language of spirit, and just using different techniques and trying different things, being creative and seeing what kind of responses you get. And I think that really does help establish a dialogue that can expand and evolve over time.
Oh, goodness, Darryl, this has been amazing. Everyone, darrylanka.com. And you have coming up also another, is it the seventh installment for the social experiment in Sedona? Is that correct?
Yes, Sedona, in the
In September.
September 14th and 15th at the Sedona Center there. And also there's a one coming up in January called the Channel Panel back in Sedona as well, at the Performing Arts Center. Both of these events are at the Performing Arts Center in Sedona. So September 14th and 15th, and then I believe January 5th, the Channel Panel also at the Performing Arts Center in Sedona. And that will be part of the Interstellar Alliance social experiment that Bashar will be delivering there. He's going to be describing some different possible scenarios for the idea of how we might experience open contact and how we can be more involved and engaged with that.
Amazing. Is there, I want to, not take up all of your time because I definitely could. Is there any last thing that you or Bashar might extend to us to continue to stay in this alignment so that we can move on that accelerated path?
Well, it's becoming very familiar with Bashar's formula of, acting on your passion, the 5 steps that go with acting on your passion, that will allow you to use it as an instruction manual to allow your life to unfold automatically in a more positive, creative way, to help us get in touch with our belief systems and let go of the ones that are simply no longer relevant for us to hold on to. So it's following that formula and understanding it with clarity and applying it with precision that really does make a huge difference in our physical reality experience. So I would always encourage people to learn that formula as clearly as they possibly can and apply it and follow your passion as often as you possibly can to allow it to prove to you that it can support you in life in a variety of different ways. So I would suggest always following the formula that Bashar provides for us.
Amazing. Well, Darryl, just so much gratitude for all the work you are doing. Thank you so much. And
my pleasure, and thank you for having opportunities like this to share information. This is, I think, these kinds of conversations are very valuable, and that you have provided an outlet for it, I think, is also an important work. So thank you for doing that as well.
everyone, that's this episode. This is Darryl Anka, channel of Bashar. Please do continue to follow your highest excitement with absolutely no insistence on the details of the outcome, because that is what is helping you and all of us move together. So once again, thank you, Darryl. Check out bashar.org and darrylanka.com. And of course, his escape rooms if you're in California and Calabasas. I'm going to be there soon. I love them. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.